minutes about products that you can discuss, about our process that you can discuss, CPA. And I'm going to tell you when we get there that you don't want to disclose everything because you want to be able to have a legitimate, substantive purpose in visiting with the CPA a second time. So you're purposely going to withhold some information. Besides of which, if you dumped it all on them in the first call, they wouldn't remember it anyway. So when we get to that area, I'll remind you again that that you can hold back some information so that you have an opportunity later to discuss it. I also want to mention that I said to you, only take the business direct brochure and the annual report with you. There's a purpose behind that as well. In the course of your discussion, if the CPA asks, quote, do you have any information on that, unquote, that gives you another wonderful opportunity to say, you bet, I'll give you a call, I'll bring it by personally. I want to also talk about something that I've discovered in my calling on CPA firms. One would think that every bank in town is in fact calling on these firms, and that's not the case. As a matter of fact, it's not unusual that the CPA's own bank hasn't called on them in the last 6 months, even if they have a branch downstairs in the same building that the CPA occupies as a tenant. Matter of fact, if you want to ask that question, and I'd be a little careful that when you ask it, and perhaps it's not appropriate on the first call, but I have asked many times, how many bankers call on you? How often do you get calls from bankers? And they're frankly a little embarrassed sometimes at the lack of calling that the bankers are doing. And almost always, when the banker's calling on, they're not getting repeat business. By the way, there are other vendors that do call on these CPAs, for example, payroll services, investment services, retirement plans, and those people call on a fairly regular basis. If you ask the CPA, how often do you hear from the payroll sales representative, they'll often tell you, I hear from them about every 3 or 4 months. But for whatever reasons, and maybe your market's a little bit different, I suspect it's not, because I've been in a lot of those markets, the CPAs are not being called on as often as you would think. Okay, we've talked about some sort of overall mechanics before the call, about the industry, about the issue of calling on a CPA firm. Let's talk now about the call itself. And let me walk you through, when I make the call, sort of the order in which I present the information, what I talk about. And while I'm not suggesting to you that it's perfect, for the most part I try to stick to this routine. And you may want to develop what I will call a pre-flight checklist to take with you on the call to guarantee that you cover all the issues that we're talking about here in this video. It's not unusual if you don't do that to walk out of the call and say, oh shucks, I forgot to talk about whatever, and then you realize that you've got to go back and do that again. And it's best to get some of these items out on the table the first call. So let's talk about what they are. Let's start, as we develop this call, let's start with the telemarketing call. You shouldn't have any problem getting the appointment. I'd be surprised if you did. As a matter of fact, we've even used temp agencies to call CPA firms and ask them if they would meet with us, and you'll usually get an 80 or 90% acceptance rate. But all you need to say on the telemarketing call is, Mr. CPA, you have some clients, I'm certain, that are customers of Wells Fargo. I'd like to come by and tell you how we finance small businesses, what our attitude is about financing small business, so that if any of those clients should ask you, you'll be informed, and as well to generally represent Wells Fargo to you as somebody you could call in the event you needed to talk to somebody at Wells Fargo. So the telemarketing call should not be difficult. You might want to practice with a buddy before you actually start making the calls, but you should get a fairly high hit rate on it. Now, once you have the appointment, it's important that you understand where the office is located, that it's clear to you, and that you show up 5 minutes early. Now, I don't mean 10 or 15 because that's too early, but you would never be late. If you show up 10 or 15 minutes early, sit in your car, spend the time doing something productive, but walk into the office as close to being exactly 5 minutes early as you can. When you're greeted by the CPA and you're walking back to the conference room, I always tell the CPA, I appreciate you spending some time with me today. I know you're busy, and I know that you make a living billing your hours, billing your time. And I'm not contributing to that today. I recognize that, I understand that, and I appreciate the fact that you're giving me some of that time. Now, that acknowledgement is somewhat unique. You'll probably be the first banker that ever said something like that. Now, I can promise you the CPA is thinking that, because they have to bill out so many hours per week, per month, in order to get their revenue to where it needs to be to cover their overhead and to make a profit. So your very acknowledgement of their spending some of their billable hours with you is a plus. I also fairly early on like to make the statement, I'm not here to try to solicit your business. I want to get that on the table quickly. I'm here to talk to you about how Wells Fargo can add some value to your clients. And you probably have a perception about Wells Fargo Bank. Now that perception might be positive, it might be negative, it might be indifferent, but whatever that perception is, I'm here to change it. And if it's positive, I'd like to make it more positive. If it's indifferent, I'd like to move it into a more positive area. And if it's negative, I'd like to move it out of that negative area and try to create some positive thoughts about what it is that we're doing. And I don't know if you know this, but we are the largest small business lender in the country. We have loans now in every state in the nation. My experience with CPAs is they're expecting you to go into that sort of banker-CPA relationship at that point. So I here would inject the fact that my purpose for calling today is for you and I to talk about some ways that we can add value to your clients. And then if we can do that, of course, both the CPA and the banker will be better off. And it's not just about you and me. Now, very early in the call, I then will ask, everybody has a different definition of what small business is. And before I tell you what ours is, could you tell me a little bit about your practice, about the type of clients you have, type of industries they're in, whether they're profit, nonprofit, public, how many accounts you may have. Can you just talk a little bit about your firm, when it was established, how long it's been here, so that I can understand your firm better. And of course, at that point in time, turn on your listening skills and keep your mouth shut and let the firm start to talk about itself. Ask a couple questions along the way. That process could take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. And it gives you a chance to sort of relax and sit back before you have to launch into anything that may be difficult, depending on your experience with the products that we're going to talk about. When a CPA is finished talking about their practice, I then want you to talk about what I'll call process. Now, process obviously is different from product. Process is how we do loans. In other words, we don't send the loans to a central underwriting center someplace. It's very important we tell the customer, let me talk about how we process a business loan. I have loan limits. I can make business loan decisions, so I control the timeline based upon whatever activity I have going on, how many other applications. I can make a commitment to a timeline, and I can honor that commitment. I always explain that we use on our laptops a process that aids and assists a loan officer at coming to that decision, and that this process essentially allows, through, and I use the term red light, yellow light, green light process because it's easy to understand that, allows the individual to move quickly and get to the decision of either we can approve the request as submitted, or we can't approve that request, but we can come back with a counteroffer. So I always think it's important to talk about our process in terms of quick turnaround time. The other thing I like to talk about, because it's unique in our business, is risk-based pricing. It's unique in terms of the fact that we compete against many community banks who have a very, very